Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef, and welcome to this video presented by me and the giant zit on my forehead. I know if you're like me, you go to the Chinese buffet and you're like, oh my god, cream cheese rangoon. What am I doing with my life? I need a whole plate full. It was the best thing on the bar, in my opinion. Still is, besides chicken on a stick. And I don't like to take advantage of either one. But I will say that the creaminess and crispiness of the cream cheese rangoon always keeps me coming back. In this recipe, I wanted to keep it as close as possible to the original without sacrificing too much in the way of flavor or texture. So if you miss these creamy and chewy little bites of deliciousness, here's your chance to make them again. Before we get started, I'm gonna get you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this video with all your friends if you think they'll like it, and most of all, I hope you enjoy it. All right, let's get started. For this recipe, you're going to need cheese on cheese topped with some crab meat. I've pondered the best way to replace egg roll wrappers for a while now. I've even gone as far as trying to make an egg roll wrapper batter, but to no avail. Let's go ahead and get our filling out of the way. In a bowl, add in 4 ounces of cream cheese, waterfall about 4 ounces of lump crab meat. Claw meat is acceptable here too, but not as delicious. We will want to add some flavors to this in the form of onion powder, about a half teaspoon worth. Follow this up with a 1/4 teaspoon of granulated garlic, and 2 teaspoons of real Worcestershire sauce. Mix this with a rubber spatula or by gloved hand until everything is homogeneous. I'm using the Worcestershire sauce to add a bit of sweetness that you usually get from the American Chinese buffets. This is also the reason that I didn't add any salt. The cream cheese should provide just enough, but feel free to taste and sprinkle any in if you want. Now that that's taken care of, we can go ahead and start making these things. Here I have some provolone cheese slices that are round. Feel free to use a square variety. These are just what I had in my direct reach. Place a nonstick pan over medium heat and allow it to get warm. The idea for this is pretty similar to how you'd use normal egg wraps. I'd go ahead and grab a spatula as well. I threw my cheese on the pan expecting a sizzle, but all I got was a sad sound of silence. The idea is just like making cheese tortillas, except you don't want to flip them. Using your spatula, start scraping up the edges to ensure that they aren't stuck. This will take a bit more time to happen than you think, but once you're able to pull up half the cheese from the pan, we could take a nice sized dollop of our crab cheese and place it in the middle. Fold this and press it in. The first one is never perfect, so come just a little closer and I'll show you one more. Alright, now that you're here, I need to tell you something. The code to the basement is 12687373. When you get down there, you'll be approached by a man named Charles. He will give you a key to a storage unit that's located in St. Paul, Minnesota called Big Bunny's World of Stores and Ages. Slide the key under door 69 and the rabbit will slide an envelope back under the door. Bring this to me and I'll tell you what it says in the comment section. And we're done. I'd say this definitely covers the basis of crispiness. I wanted to dress these up in a nice food tuxedo, so I topped them with some green onions and a fancy little swoosh of sriracha on the side. Every buffet line's wet dream. Let's go ahead and give this a big bite. These were heavenly. I hit my goal of crisp and creamy, but I also hit another marker I didn't know I wanted. Chewy. Something about the chew just made this a much more fun experience. This was a real treat. I suggest this stay a treat because I ate 4 of them before I even turned the camera off. See y'all next time. For the fried pickles, the story changes a little because we need some sort of coating on the outside. Today, I have my trusty dredging station of whisked eggs and ground pork rinds. For the pickles, find some of the best that you can find at your store, or make your own. I don't know Cleveland, nor have I been to his kitchen, but these will work just fine. Start by squeezing some of the pickle juice out before adding them to your eggs. Let the excess drip off a little and then toss them in your pork rinds. It's not a perfect method, but we're shooting for them to look like this. Here's a better look at that wrist action for those of you that really wanted it. Once they're breaded, place them onto a plate or a parchment-lined pan, and now we can bring them over to our hot oil and carefully toss them in. I'm going to be honest, I cooked these last so I was tired of frying things. Please cook these in batches as well until they're nice and golden brown. It'll only take about 3 minutes for this to happen if done in batches. I am certain that the outcome will look a bit better than what I've created here, but these were still delicious. Let these drain on a paper towel lined plate and serve. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef, aka Cold Cut Comboer. You ever just wanted a cold cut sandwich but in a different form? Then boy do I have the recipe for you. The taste of ham and turkey with mustard brings me right back to my childhood, and I wanted to recreate that here. I tried to get as creative as possible, so I hope you enjoy it. A quick disclaimer, the cheese sauce I make in the video is not how I want you to make your cheese sauce. Please refer to the written recipe to make a much better and creamier sauce than I did. Anyways, let's get started. Pull out some Colby Jack and sharp cheddar cheese. I won't judge you for buying the pre-shredded stuff. As you'll see here, I have to get creative and shred mine using a mandolin. It's not ideal, but I'm not going to complain. I should have got the pre-shredded stuff. If you're going to follow in my footsteps, please be super careful. I've seen many fingertips lost to these things. Not personally, but from gratuitous amounts of YouTube kitchen accident videos. Next up, let's take care of these deli meats. Feel free to dice yours or tear it. I just took the entire slab and shredded it. I wanted it to mimic the lettuce on a sandwich, so I cut it rather thin to add the volume I wanted. You should give it a little taste to make sure it's ham. Yep, it's ham. Let's do the same for the turkey real quick like. Alright, the next item is optional, but if you can handle it, I implore you to add it. The basil adds such a nice complexity to everything at the end, and it's so worth it. Remove your leaves from the stem, and place all of your small leaves into the biggest one and roll it up like drugs. Slice this into thin strips. This is called a chiffonade. Okay, let's take care of these chips. I suggest you lay down some parchment paper on your baking sheet for this one. I grabbed some fairly inexpensive hard salami that's also probably cut just a little too thick. Lay these out on as many pans as needed. If you find thinner sliced salami, I suggest you cut your cook time by about 2 minutes, maybe even more. But for now, throw these into an oven that's set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 minutes or until your salami has darkened in color. While those are in the oven, let's make this mustard cheese sauce. Don't forget, the better sauce recipe is in the description. But for mine, I added 2 cups of half and half into a pot set over medium-high heat. I got this to a bare simmer before turning the heat off and removing it from the eye. I added in 2 tablespoons of yellow mustard and then slowly started whisking in my Colby Jack. I seasoned this with a half teaspoon of salt and a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. Alright, by the time this is thickened, your salami chips should be done. And as you can see, I made a ton of them. And yeah, a little floppy, but they're still hot and cooking. I even mine out just a little bit before adding my toppings. Some ham, some turkey, and some shredded cheddar. I placed that into the oven that's still warm for about 5 minutes to get the cheese melted. Once melted, I topped with my mustard cheese sauce. And finally, some basil. Look at how damn tasty this looks. Let's take this first bite, which is for my Patreon community. Oh damn, this mustard cheese sauce is fantastic. It works so well with just everything. And the basil comes through so nicely and makes it just a touch lighter. You'll work well with everything too if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. If we're talking Hooters, we're talking about buffalo sauce. And from everything I've seen, they use a compound butter when they're cooking. Which is good because it's easy to make. Break up a half pound of unsalted butter into a food processor. You can also just use softened butter as well, but I didn't have that kind of foresight. Next up, we'll want to add about a half cup of hot sauce. Use whatever you want. I went with something very mild but still delicious. And since we used unsalted butter, we'll want to season it up a bit. Feel free to use salt, but I went with a half teaspoon of smokestack. If you're using a food processor, pulse this a few times to get it started. Then blend on low until everything is fully incorporated. If you're using softened butter, you should just be able to fork your butter into submission. No matter how you choose to make this, just make sure it looks something close to this. We don't need this right now, but it can be made ahead of time. Just make sure people don't know how delicious it is, so they don't use it on all of their cauliflower wings. Someone requested Hooters buffalo shrimp, and I listened. I did not know much about this appetizer, but I saw it and knew it was going to be f***ing delicious. The process is going to be the exact same as the pickles, but with shrimp instead. Drop a tail-on shrimp into some egg, let the excess drip, then toss it in your pork rind crumbs. It should look like this. I think the non-smooth surface of the shrimp helped the pork rind stick better. Set your body to speed/duration of 4000% and bread the rest of these little shrimps. Again, set them onto a parchment-lined baking sheet and bring them over to that skin-melting oil. Just like the rest of the things we fried, you'll want to cook these in batches. The shrimp should only take a few minutes to cook at most and should be golden brown delicious. Just like with the wings, have some of that sauce ready to toss that hot shrimp in. I'll give you a moment to stare into the glistening sauce. Wow, oh yeah, ooh. Okay, your moment's up and these look delicious. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. I saw a TikTok of someone making chips out of ground chicken, and my initial thought was to turn this into carnivore Doritos. But after looking through my list of videos, I ran across chicken parm. So instead of Doritos, how about I make some chicken parm nachos? Like, why not, right? I'll eventually do a video of the chicken parm the way it should be, but for now, you'll likely dig this. Here comes Gentry walking in with his big old fork. Sup, bud? Sorry, I won't look at you anymore. So, the idea is pretty simple. Grinding chicken, or buying ground chicken in my case, and getting it as thin as possible to create chips. A quick note, start with some parchment paper on the table and not cling film. You'll be cooking it on parchment, and I now have the unfortunate job of flipping this later. So, slap down your ground chicken and begin to knead it to the width of your parchment paper. It should be about the size of a half sheet pan. If you don't know what size that is, grab a standard cookie sheet and compare it to that. Just big rectangles, that's the goal. So the initial plan was to flatten this out between cling film, but I realized I don't want to cook plastic. I'm not trying to get high here. Here's the flip I dreaded, but I'm happy that it went well. I kept spreading this out till I remember there's a better way to do this. I bet you haven't seen one of these in a while. It's the perfect tool for flattening things out. I haven't made real dough in so long that I forgot rolling pins even exist. So roll this out pretty thin and just press it until it goes past the parchment. You can pull the excess off and fill in any empty spots you have. With 2 pounds of meat, I was left with about 3 ounces of excess. So, in the process of flipping, I somehow made the perfect seam for 2 sheet pans. You should be able to do this naturally since you started with parchment. You did start with parchment, right? Slide these 2 onto your pans carefully. They likely won't break apart sliding them. If you recklessly slap yours down, comment below to let me know how it went. I season each of these up with a half teaspoon of salt, a quarter teaspoon of black pepper, a half teaspoon of garlic powder. Hey friend, I'm gonna need you to leave. And a half teaspoon of onion powder. Place these into your oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 176 degrees Celsius for 25 to 30 minutes or until crispy. I flipped mine for the last 5 minutes of cooking just to make sure the underside dried out a little as well. Chicken parm is usually topped with a red sauce, but we can do better. I basically took the elements of a marinara and made an Alfredo sauce with it. Place a pan over medium-high heat and add in 2 tablespoons of butter, then a quarter teaspoon of black pepper, a half teaspoon of granulated garlic, and a half teaspoon of red pepper flakes. Stir this around and toast your spices for about 30 seconds. The butter should be getting dark, and it's because the garlic is caramelizing. After that, add in 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning and mix it around a little as well. Finally, add in 1 1/4 cup of heavy cream. Give this a titillating whisk. Reduce the heat to medium and allow to reduce until thickened. Just remember, cream loves to boil over, so don't leave it. Once thickened, turn the heat off and either pour in a half cup of grated Parmesan or grate over fresh Parmesan directly into the cream. 1 more titillating whisk and this should be good to go. Finally, add in about a half teaspoon of kosher salt, but be sure to taste it. Add in more if you think it needs it, but a half teaspoon was perfect for my sauce. Set this aside and it's time to take these crispy babies out. They look like thin pork rinds, which is a good sign. Feel free to cut these however you want. Just know they may shatter, especially around the edges. I took my sheets and made triangular chips out of them, because, nachos. While cutting them up, I kept taking little bites of the shattered pieces. It's wild how much they feel like chips and dry chicken at the same time. The dry chicken part makes sense, but the chips part is still a bit wild, honestly. These are begging for some sort of dip, or marinara sauce. Feel free to use the same pan you cooked your chicken on for this part, but if you have a tiny sheet pan, it lets you stack everything up a bit higher. Place down some more parchment, then some chicken chips, shred over some low moisture mozzarella, and then some Parmesan. And finally, a little marinara. Repeat this until you're out of sauce, but do not skip this last and crucial step, which is grating over as much mozzarella and Parmesan that you're almost uncomfortable with. For me, I could have used the entire half pound of block of each, but I'm trying to show some moderation. Place these back into your oven at the same temperature for about 5 minutes or until everything is melted and has a nice color. I added a bit of chopped parsley out of the tradition of making my food look better. It's wholly unnecessary in my opinion as far as the flavor, but whatever, it looks nice. Let me take this first bite from a Patreon community. Not as good of a cheese pool as I was hoping for, but I was right about the sauce. The sauce plus these chips alone would have been straight up fire. The cheese just adds a bit of nuttiness and creaminess that I enjoy. You can add a bit of nuttiness and creaminess too by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Hey there, my meaty friends, this is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef. If it looks like I'm in a dungeon right now, don't worry, I'm not, I'm just in a dark garage. But anyways, in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a dip. I was kind of aiming it towards this big game. I don't know if I can actually say the name of it and be demonetized or not, so I'm just not going to say it. It's a football game that's happening in February that a lot of people want to watch. I had this recipe in mind just for like parties and things like that, and I thought it'd be a good one for that game. It's a super simple dip recipe, but I think people that aren't even on this diet will actually really enjoy this one. So if you end up making this and you bring it to a party, I suggest bringing yourself some pork rinds and maybe finding some like cheap bread to cut thin and toast it to serve along with it. I think you'll really impress a lot of people. And before we start, I'm gonna get you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you're interested in supporting it, there's a link down below to join as a channel member or join my Patreon community. To start this one, you'll need about 1 pound of shaved steak. If you can't find shaved steak, you can cut either ribeye or sirloin against the grain as thin as you can. And if you really want to go for it, steakums will be my last option, but it's also acceptable. This is some cheesesteak that I get from Aldi, and it's usually rather large, so I'm going to have to give it a nice rough chop. And by rough, I mean wide cuts. We don't want this to turn into ground beef. Once it's chopped up, preheat a pan over medium-high for just a minute or two and add in all of your beef. We'll go ahead and season this up with about a half teaspoon of salt. Let this cook for about 3 minutes, mixing occasionally or until most of the pink from the meat is gone. Set aside and pull out a block of Swiss cheese. You can see that it's Swiss by the holes in it. Can you see it? I see it. Grate your cheese however you want, but I'm going to slap mine against a box grater and go to town. You'll want to grate the entire block. Set this aside and let's start assembling. Place an oven-safe pan over medium heat and add in an 8-ounce block of cream cheese. Season this up with 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of granulated onion, a half teaspoon of granulated garlic, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Start chopping all of this up and then have a brief panic because you think you're burning your cream cheese. Quickly, get the meat into the pan before... Okay, we're fine. Just breathe. When your meat gets into the pan, the little bit of moisture from it should help the cream cheese to melt a little quicker. Just keep mixing this around until you no longer see chunks of cream cheese. Once you're happy with how it looks, add in about 2/3 of your Swiss cheese and mix that in as well. Once it's mixed in, smooth out the top and add the rest of your Swiss cheese to it. Place this whole thing into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 11 to 14 minutes or until the Swiss cheese is nicely brown. Get this onto a tray alongside some of your favorite pork rinds and admire your work by giving it a taste. Creamy and beefy is an understatement here. If I was eating bread, I think I could slap this right into a hoagie roll and be fine with calling this a normal cheesesteak sandwich. But alas, I'm more than happy to enjoy it with my crunchy skins. Hey there, my meaty friends. Today I'm making carnivore quiet dogs. Hush puppies. What a f***ing name, huh? Anyways, it's rather easy to make. To a blender or food processor, add in 8 ounces of chicken breast, 3 ounces of pork rinds, 3 eggs, a half teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt or choice of seasoning blend, I went with Cajun for the record, and finally either 1 teaspoon of granulated onion or 2 teaspoons of dehydrated onion, or no onion if you feel like you're going to leave a comment about how that's not carnivore. After it's blended, let's go over to a stove and set up a fry station. For mine, I placed a 6-quart pot over medium heat, then added 1 pound of lard. I'm sure this isn't the best lard I could buy, but at least it's not canola oil. Anyways, let this come up to about 325 degrees Fahrenheit. This took mine about 5 minutes from a cold start. When I don't have a thermometer on me, I like to test my oil by placing a very small amount of what I'm cooking into the oil. If it sizzles, it's ready to go. Mine is sizzling on impact, so that must mean Miss Frizzle and the gang are being scorched right now. Since it is sizzling, we can go ahead and start making balls. And what better way to make balls than go to your local gym locker room at 7 a.m. They're just everywhere, fresh for the picking. This time, I'm going to use a cookie scoop for a nice portion. Try not to overcrowd your pan. Doing that can reduce the temperature of your oil and make it take much longer to cook. After about 3 minutes, give them a flip and rejoice in the fact that they didn't stick. Push all of these flip balls to one side and continue making your balls until all of your ball batter has been used up. Cook these hush puppies for about 5 to 6 minutes in total, or until you have an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, these look awesome. They're not as dark as hush puppies that I'm used to having, but they are golden brown and glorious. Oops, excuse my paper towel. Stupid, the paper towel ruins the video. There we go, beautiful. Opening one up reveals a fluffy and steamy interior, something I'm looking for in hush puppies when I have them. And for the taste, you know these are good. Shallow frying can definitely be a pain in the ass, but for this, it's worth the effort. Hey there, my meaty friends. This is Reed, aka CarnivorousChef, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make pigs in a blanket. These are typically made with hot dogs wrapped in biscuit dough or croissant dough, but you know, we can't have biscuit or a croissant dough, so today I'm going to make these with my tortilla recipe that I used to make enchiladas. It's very soft, a little bit crispy. Use an egg wash to make it a little bit shiny too. These are very easy to make. It's 3 ingredients in a blender along with your choice of hot dog, smoked sausage, whatever you want to use. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with everyone that you think might like it, but most of all, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's get started. For this recipe, you're going to have to make the critical decision of smoked sausage or hot dogs. I personally picked smoked sausage because hot dogs just aren't very good after the first one. I specifically chose Conecuh sausage for this. Dear Conecuh Sausage Company, if you ever want to sponsor a video, collaborate, or just show off your facility, please email me. It's in my About Me section. Sincerely, one hungry boy. Now, if you're going to use rope sausage like this, you can go with a few sizes. This is the old ding donger. It's a pretty aggressive move, but it'll allow anyone that's truly hungry to feel full. The next size down is going to be our half chub. This is the size I think of when having pigs in a blanket for dinner. And finally, the bashful Billy. Everyone has had those nasty little cocktail smokies covered in cheap biscuits before. Those are the best version for some reason, so I'll be making something similar. Cut your sausage to size and we can move on to our dough. For the dough, you'll need some eggs. Well, 3 to be exact. Set the other 2 aside for later purposes. To that, add in 3 ounces of ground pork rinds, and finally 3 ounces of mozzarella cheese. Blend this on low for about 2 minutes or until a dough ball is formed. Perfect. Bring some parchment paper over to your workstation along with some butter. This dough is very sticky, so I'll be using the butter to help the dough glide off my hands. Take about 1 tablespoon of your dough and press it into an oval on your parchment paper. Now lay your sausage or hot dog on top of it. Pick up your parchment paper and fold the dough to the other side. This dough does a great job at sealing, so you shouldn't have an issue with that. If there's any excess, just pull it off and put it into the next dough ball. Repeat this until all of your dough has been used up. I was able to get about 20 of these mini piggies. There's something about making finger foods like this that puts me into a deep trance. I only ever snap out of it when I'm on the last one. Now that we have all these wrapped up and ready to go, let's get it to shine with an egg wash. Simply crack an egg into a bowl and give it a pretty rigorous forking. If you have a brush each one with a little bit of egg. If not, you could be a caveman alongside me and use your fingers to brush the egg on. When they're all egged up, place them into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes or until nicely golden brown. These turned out even better than I was expecting. I knew this dough would be a better fit than a wet batter, but adding a little bit of egg made it pop. If you're curious about the sauce on the side, don't be. I made it to dip these in, but even good chefs make mistakes. Which this sauce was a whole mistake. Sauce aside, these are really damn good. Good enough for me to suffer 3rd-degree mouth burns. Excuse me while I go cool my tongue off. See y'all next time. We're going to start this recipe with your favorite thing on the carnivore diet, garlic. Go ahead and call this recipe whatever you want. Carnivore, keto, whatever. I don't care anymore, as is indicated by this long-winded script entry. I removed garlic jackets by shaking them in a jar before, so I'm going to do the same here. Simply place 2 heads of garlic and begin to for about a minute and be amazed. Doesn't look like it did it this time. Maybe that's because I was only using a couple of cloves before. Whatever, get the jackets off and let's get to roasting. Grab a little piece of foil and place the garlic in the middle. Then add about a tablespoon of lard and a big pinch of salt. Wrap this tightly and place it into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 to 20 minutes or until the garlic is nicely browned. While that's in the oven, let's grab our second favorite thing on the carnivore diet, parsley. Roll this up and give it a nice chopping. Set it aside and get out your newly roasted garlic. You know it's nicely roasted when you could do this to it. Now start doing this with all of the garlic so that we have a nice paste. You can also give this a rough chop to help it along if you feel the need to. Next, we can add the parsley and top that with a nice stick of softened salted butter. You don't have to do this part with your hands, so I'll just let you figure out how you want to incorporate this. I just enjoy the feeling of butter in my dirty hands. Once it's nice and mushed together, place this onto a plate or wrap in plastic and set aside. Okay, now for our third favorite item on carnivore, ribeye, or really any steak you desire. Just make sure it's about 1 inch thick. Simply cut about 1 inch by 1 inch cubes. Feel free to use a ruler if you're really into your measurements. Now strategically press the cubes back together into a steak shape, and season generously with salt. The idea behind this is to have nicely browned bites of steak that are browned all over. And the best way to do this that I found is just to cook it like it's an intact steak. Place these steak-shaped cubes into a pan over medium-high heat and sear it for about 3 minutes. You'll want a crust that looks something like this. Flip all the steak pieces and continue to sear on the other side. Push all the pieces to the other side of the pan and add in about 3 tablespoons of the compound butter. Grab a spoon, tilt the pan, and simply baste your steak pieces continuously for about 2 minutes. After that time, you can turn the heat off and top with a little more of that butter. Stir this in and plate it up. Pour that melted butter on top and sprinkle on just a touch more salt. And look at that. We got a nicely browned steak bite that's perfectly medium rare. If you're trying to feed a lot of people this recipe, just do it in batches so you don't end up with this.